Now, for our next presentation, we'll move on to Dermot Grogan, here in the department, inspector, and he'll go through the technical specifications. So Dermot, over to you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So Tams 3, obviously, new capital investment scheme set to run from 2023 to 2027. We've had a full review of all the investments from Tams 2 is undertaken, and obviously the terms and conditions are updated and revised for all of the schemes, for all the schemes to bring them into line with the CAP strategic plan. Okay. Again, the CAP strategic plan have presented us with new sets of challenges and new objectives, and basically in Tams, for Tams 3, all our investments are going to be linked to these 4 areas: climate, environment, animal welfare, and health and safety. So these are the, we've tried to steer most of our investments towards meeting the requirements under these headings, and these will be the ones we'll be recording as time goes on. Just a little bit of history. I had a look back at the organic investment in Tams 2. Basically, we had up to date, we've had 904 claims paid for a total of 1,913 approvals, and that represents 2.7% of the total claims for all of the Tams 2 schemes. The amount of money paid out in organics in Tams 2 was 3.6 million to date, which represents 0.9%, less than 1% of the total payments to farmers of 407 million. And the average grant per claim under the organic scheme in Tams 2 is 3,981. I just had a quick look through some of the main investment headings then to see what kind of areas were people investing in Tams 2. 50% of the claims that we paid were basically related to grassland. About 20% to do with handling equipment, various types, and there's a certain amount of crossover between some of these categories. For example, and then nutrient management comes in with about 10%, and then tillage, animal housing, sheep fencing in particular, dairy equipment, horticulture and poultry. The last few there are all below 10% of the total amount of claims. So I also just had a quick look through the actual sub-investments, the actual items that were popular in Tams 2. So just here on this table, I've put together the top 20 actual items that were bought. So you see mowers, this is what's contributing to the grassland having such a big contribution to the total share. 205 mounted mowers, so a lot of hay being made. Again, loaders, toppers, dung spreaders, straw chopper, slurry pumps and agitators. Again, more toppers, grass harrows, hay bobs, mulchers. So quite a lot of mobile equipment here. Almost all of the top 20 are mobile equipment. And then that's probably straightforward enough in terms of the kind of enterprises that people are involved in on the organics. But obviously we would like to see maybe a bit more in certain categories. So just then to recap again about Tams 3 in general, there's 10 schemes listed there. You're probably familiar with them all by now: the welfare, nutrient storage, young farmers, organics, tillage, pig and poultry, dairy equipment, low emission slurry spreading, the solar scheme, the women's farmer scheme, and the farm safety scheme. So we'll obviously try and concentrate on the organics for the moment. And again, the ceilings have been reset for all applicants. So in other words, new ceiling, even if you had applied in Tams 2, you get a whole new ceiling for Tams 3, 90,000, except for the pigs and poultry and the low emission slurry, they have different ceilings. Partnership ceilings remain at 160,000. And there are individual ceilings for low emission slurry spreading and for the solar capital investment scheme. Scheme launches again, we opened solar on 22nd of February, animal welfare then after that in February, pigs and poultry in April, organics at the end of April. The remaining schemes are going to open on a phased basis. We're hoping that we'll have a couple of them opening now next week. And our plan is still to have the first tranche closing on the 16th of June. And basically, the purpose of the Organic Capital Investment Scheme from the Tams perspective is to facilitate the development of the organic sector to ensure regular supply of high-end quality organic produce, and to incentivize organic farmers who are current participants in the organic farming scheme to upgrade their agricultural buildings and equipment, providing them with an increased level of support. So 2 purposes, basically. Again, as mentioned earlier, 60% grant rate, must have payment or be registered for payment under the organic farming scheme. Otherwise, an organic farmer will still be entitled to 40% grant. 90,000 investment ceiling, as mentioned before. We have a similar list of investments as was provided in Tams 2 with some new investments. There's 51 main investment headings with over 300 sub-investment items available on the list, which is published on the department's website under that address there, just below. But I mean, you should probably have a good look through those investments before considering any kind of investment. I'm just going to talk a little bit now about the terms and conditions, again, which are on the website, and they're an important part of the decision-making and application process is to go through the terms, be familiar with them. I know this is an onerous task in many cases to read terms and conditions of any scheme, but in particular for, let's say, if you want to have a start, I'd suggest Annex B in the terms and conditions, which gives a list of the eligible investments. And I pulled out some of the organic investments here just to show you the kind of information that you need to be aware of. Pay attention to the details in the top where it lists the investments, the sub-investment, whether or not you need planning permission, whether or not you need detailed drawings, whether you need a farmyard sketch or not, whether it's relevant to nitrates, own labour, pouring of concrete, serial numbers, and the enterprise. Just be aware of these before you decide what it is you want to get involved in. The same then, I'll just go back there if I may. Yeah, if you see, for example, grain store down here is different from the tillage machinery and the cultivation equipment. These are all mobile. And so whereas the grain store below, there's planning permission required, there's details required. So once you get into structures, there's probably a bit more paperwork involved compared to mobile equipment. So the application process is the same, pretty much the same as in Tams 2, and Ciarán will take you through the steps involved in that. The scheme will operate in tranches, which means that there will hopefully be 2 more tranches at least this year, and possibly 3 to 4 tranches every year during the course of the 5 years operations of the scheme. So that means if you miss the opportunity to apply before the closing of the first tranche because of delays with paperwork or planning or whatever, you will have opportunities to apply again in subsequent tranches. If a tranche is oversubscribed, there will be ranking and selection carried out on the applications in order to try and give every scheme a fair share of the total pot that is available for that particular tranche. And if your application is not selected after the ranking and selection, you get an automatic rollover for the next tranche with the same application. If you fail to be selected in the second tranche, then you have to reapply into a third application in effect, or a third tranche. We'll do our best to ensure that as many as possible of the organic applications get in, because in general, there wouldn't be a big amount of the total applications we'd be expecting. And just for your information, there's a quick look at the marking sheet that we would be using in the Organic Capital Investment Scheme for ranking and selection. Hopefully we won't have to get too involved in that, but again, this is up on the website, and I'm not going to go into details here, but if anyone has any particular questions, we can talk about it later. And we're basically trying to steer it towards younger, smaller, and more environmentally sensitive farming, be slightly balanced in favor of those for ranking and selection. Just then some general things to be aware of in terms of general applies to all of the schemes, but it will apply in particular as well to the organics, is that the terms and conditions that we publish and that are available on the website on the application date are what apply to your file. The specifications of the equipment or buildings will be whatever the specs are that are on the website at the approval date, which is a number of months usually after the application date. So just be aware of that. Don't be afraid to have a look through the specifications documents and familiarizing yourself with what's involved. The reference costs, again, they're the costs that are published on the application date, and they will be the ones that apply. So if you're new to Tams, you need to apply to Tams roles for a Tams 3 number and an agent authorization form, and that you deal with Tams roles at agriculture.gov.ie for that. And any technical queries that can't be answered by reading the manuals and terms and conditions and specifications and things like that, you can apply them to us, send them to us at tams@agriculture.gov.ie. So again, in general, applicants will be required to supply geotagged photographs for all investments via the Agri-Snap application. This is a requirement of the EU Commission now for the new CAP. All investments have to be verified in situ in some form or fashion, and Agri-Snap is what we've agreed to use. And there's a few little teething problems with that in certain areas, in particular pigs and poultry, but in general, everybody must have their farmyard digitized in BIS. Because the Agri-Snap photographs of investments, whether they're mobile or whether they're fixed, are going to have to be linked to a LIPIS parcel number. So you still have an opportunity now, if your farmyard hasn't been digitized, to make that amendment in your returns to the single farm payment people before the end of the month. And again, the farmers, applicants must claim the items that they've purchased and the correct size dimensions. Obviously if there've any changes between that and the original proposal, you have to make us aware of them. And again, all the works now must be completed and claims must be submitted within 12 months from the date of issue of approval, or an extension of the date or by a date specified in the letter of approval, whichever is earlier. We have kind of, while you would probably still see it in the existing terms and conditions that there is 6 months mentioned for some mobile equipment, we're actually in the process of changing that to 12 months now for all investments, mainly because of the backlog in supplies and delivery. We've been fairly strong indications from the suppliers that there are likely to be severe delays in supplying of some equipment. So everything is now 12 months, but if you feel even within a couple of months that there's going to be any delay in delivery or supply of a piece of equipment, write in and ask for an extension at the earliest opportunity. And again, just a reminder that because of the issue with the delays and the 5 years requirement from the lease the 5 year requirement for being in the scheme, that's from the date of the final Tams payment. So in some cases, leases may be required for more than 5 years. There must be proper leases involved where ownership is involved in inspection or anything like that. And just to be aware that if a lease, it's easier and faster to extend the lease before it expires, rather than have to try and renew the lease after it has expired. This is something to be aware of when people are using leased property or land for eligibility. Again, joint ventures, same rules apply as in Tams 2. We'll have partnership, again, registered farm partnership expenditures. If you're registered with the department, they must be from the same bank account that you're registered with us. Again, on claims, VAT is not eligible and must be removed from the claimed amount. Any expenditure before approval on mobile investments is at the applicant's own risk. In other words, you can buy the piece of mobile equipment after you've made the application and before you've got approval. But if there's anything wrong with the paperwork afterwards, or if there's anything wrong with the equipment afterwards at inspection or at approval stage, you may not get your grant. Just be careful about, make sure everything is in line. Again, with mobile equipment, hire purchase or lease purchase is not permitted. They must own the investment. So the receipts for the equipment must be in the applicant's name or company name, and must be clear address, VAT, charge showing the VAT number, mark paid, dated, legible, clear descriptions, etc. So this is all important to make sure that your payments are processed and paid for in as quickly as we possibly can. The receipts must detail the machinery supplied, and it would make a lot more sense if the receipts would tie in with the investment items listed on our list of investments. Trade-ins are permitted, but they must be like for like and properly recorded on the documentation. Again, just a note on farmyard plan. This mainly got to do with structures, but we will ask it for all investments. I think at this stage, it's in every farmer's interest to have a proper map or scale drawing of their farmyard if they're going to be involved in schemes in the future. It's a bit of an onerous task sometimes for planners and applicants to put together a properly drawn map, but it's well worth it in terms of we need to have clarity as to where the investment items are going to be, what the layout of the farmyard is, what the risks are, and various other issues like that. So it's well worth your while when you're engaging with your planner to make sure you get a proper farm yard layout plan drawn up at that scale 1 to 500. And then obviously for farm buildings, you will need specific layout plans for that. And again, just to remind you, all the specifications and costings with new reference costs for Tams 3, and obviously these we'll have a look at these as the scheme goes on, and there may be some amendments to them as the scheme goes on over the next 5 years. There are new explanatory notes on costings available on the website as well, and they're worth having a look at under the specific headings. And obviously there will be new specs and multiple updated specs as the scheme goes on. And again, just a reminder there of the link to the website. Thank you.